Welcome back to the Culture Report. I'm Antonia Velez. More than 100 former ABC journalists are calling on Disney CEO Bob Iger to stand up to President Donald Trump. In a letter sent Wednesday for bringing back Jimmy Kimmel Live, but warned Disney must defend free speech and the freedom of press. Jimmy Kimmel's late-night show returned to the air on Tuesday night with a bang. ABC says nearly 6.3 million people watched the broadcast, while another 15 million watched on YouTube. Now, on average, just under 2 million people would typically watch Kimmel's show. There was pressure from President Trump, the head of the Federal Communications Commission, and the two largest owners of local TV stations in America to keep it off the air. Kimmel's opening monologue highlighted the importance of free speech in America. He says he's met comedians and hosts from other countries who told him that if they were to make fun of people in power, they would be imprisoned or worse.
Know how lucky we are here. Our freedom to speak is what they admire most about this country. And that's something I'm embarrassed to say I took for granted until they pulled my friend Stephen off the air and tried to coerce the affiliates who run our show in the cities that you live in to take my show off the air. That's not legal. That's not American. That is un-American.
Now, President Trump has openly said recently that broadcast licenses could be pulled from TV stations that criticize him. He posted about this on social media following Kimmel's return, hinting he'll sue ABC for the second time. According to civil rights lawyer David Lane, he can't legally do that.
There's absolutely no legal ground for Donald Trump to sue ABC for reinstating Jimmy Kimmel. There is abundant case law from the United States Supreme Court saying that when the government takes actions against people because they don't like the message that those people are sending, if what they're threatening would chill a person of ordinary firmness from speaking freely, it is unlawful. And Donald Trump is doing everything in his power to chill freedom of speech in the media. The law in America is very clear. The government doesn't get to decide what messages are good and what messages are bad. The marketplace of ideas decides that. The remedy for bad speech is good speech, not government shutting down speech.
President Trump's first lawsuit against ABC settled in December after an ABC anchor made an inaccurate statement about him on air. And we are learning more about the moment a shooter opened fire at an ICE facility in Dallas yesterday, killing one detainee and critically injuring two others before taking his own life. A law enforcement official said 29-year-old Joshua John is the suspect in what feds are calling an act of targeted violence, though the exact motive is still unknown. The director of the FBI shared a photo on social media showing a bullet from the scene that said the words anti-ICE. Now, according to the Department of Homeland Security, the shooter opened fire, quote, indiscriminately at the ICE center and entryway. No ICE agents were injured, and this is the latest in recent public attacks in the country, coming just weeks after the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. And health has been at the center of national headlines this week after President Trump and the Department of Health and Human Services told pregnant people they should avoid taking Tylenol, saying it might be linked to autism. During the press conference where the new Tylenol guidelines were announced, the president and administration mentioned several studies. Now, I spoke to Dr. Jennifer Braverman, a physician who says some small preliminary studies showed a potential link between acetaminophen and autism, but eventually larger studies came out to test whether or not there was actual causality, including one study that looked at a total of nearly 2.5 million children born throughout 1995 and 2019.
There was one that came out in 2024 that was published in JAMA that looked at sibling pairs, essentially where moms had taken Tylenol in one pregnancy and not another, to see if there was an increased rate of autism in their children in the pregnancies that they had taken Tylenol. And they did not find any link at all between Tylenol use and autism. And so I think that data is really reassuring to us as physicians that, that Tylenol does not cause autism.
Now, she went on to say that while there has been an increase in the number of people being diagnosed with autism over the years, Tylenol use hasn't really increased in pregnancy specifically, so building a strong link between autism and Tylenol usage might be short-sighted. During Trump's announcement Monday, he also said pregnant people should, quote, tough it out before reaching for Tylenol. Dr. Braverman says this statement could be dangerous.
Pregnant women should not be encouraged to just tough out high fevers that's not safer for their babies or for themselves. That carries significant risk to them and their babies, and Tylenol can potentially mitigate that risk. And I think it's very cruel in a way to say, well, if you weren't strong enough to tough it out, now you've placed your child at risk or caused your child harm in a way that is unfounded and is not supported by the scientific data.
She added that possible newfound adversity to Tylenol could lead to patients not treating pain that can be debilitating mentally and physically. Her advice: get your information from a trusted healthcare provider, not a politician. She says her counseling for patients will continue to be that the medicine remains a safe option when necessary. The FDA is beginning the process to initiate a safety label change to include a warning about the stated autism link. All right, we're going to do a little pivot here. I want to talk about history. Recently, Colorado's Democratic governor, Jared Polis, posted photos of the state's 1876 original constitution printed in languages other than English, including Spanish. Given some of the commentary surrounding the post, I wanted to highlight the deep-rooted history of Spanish in the U.S., a language that is often misrepresented as just a recent addition to the country due to immigration. Now, of course, the native languages of what is presently the United States are those pertaining to groups indigenous to the land. But when it comes to European languages, Spanish was spoken here centuries before the country was even established, even before English. I had a chat with Dr. Lina Reznicek-Parrado, a Spanish professor at the University of Denver, about this background.
Spanish was always in the New World. Spanish colonizers came before the Englishmen came to the New World. Spanish was also spoken in much of the territory that was Mexico once. And so there's a huge heritage linked to the Spanish language. In fact, there are many dialects of Spanish that are only spoken in the U.S. territories.
Now, if you remember, after the Mexican-American War, Mexico ceded 55% of its territory to the U.S., what are now several states and most of Colorado. Despite the deep-seated history and growing presence of Spanish and Spanish speakers in the U.S., there have been recent efforts to undermine its importance at a governmental level, namely the Trump administration's elimination of the White House website in Spanish and Trump signing an executive order earlier this year that designated English as the official language for the first time. Dr. Reznicek-Parrado says this is more of a political statement than a reflection of the country's reality.
It's kind of hard to ignore how these communities and these histories are relevant. And so I guess, people can kind of make that choice to erase that intentionally to prove a point, but it is there.
All right, we are currently right in the middle of Hispanic Heritage Month. It runs from September 15th to October 15th. Our state is full of rich Hispanic, Chicano, and Latino history, and one of the places helping make sure Coloradoans know all about it is History Colorado. They're currently running a couple different exhibits. Dr. Lucha Martinez de Luna, the curator of Latino history and culture at History Colorado, is joining me now. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. All right, first off, tell me a little bit about some of the exhibits that are being shown to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month at History Colorado.
Well, we have two wonderful permanent exhibits. One is Borderlands, which essentially explains the very kind of beginnings of Latino presence in Colorado and, of course, northern New Mexico. We have this border that is between New Mexico and Colorado, but the reality is that border split a cultural group that very much still recognizes this area. And so Borderlands kind of describes that. And then another exhibit that is permanent as well is El Movimiento. El Movimiento highlights social justice movements throughout history here in Colorado that begins shortly after 1848 with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, where Mexico loses a portion, a fairly significant portion of their territory to the United States, and part of that is Colorado. So it kind of starts describing what happens after 1848 in terms of social justice movements. And then right now we also have a temporary exhibit called Viva la Causa, and it essentially highlights social justice movements, two in particular, the Civil Rights Movement, or El Movimiento, and Black Lives Matter. So it's kind of an interpretation based on artists' perspectives, what they're seeing during these two movements, the very early years of El Movimiento. And that will be there till mid-October. So if you have an opportunity, please try and visit it.
That's very interesting and very important work as well. Are there any of these exhibits that kind of stand out to you, or that you want to kind of explain the process behind it a little more?
Probably Viva la Causa. I shared some photos of essentially that process, because I think that sometimes when people hear, what is a curator, what do they do?
Right.
But the reality is a lot of the work that I do is in the community. I'm rarely just sitting at a desk. I'm out in the community hearing stories, safekeeping those stories, and every once in a while we have an opportunity to tell those stories in exhibits. So Viva la Causa is one of them. It was a grant from the National Endowment of the Arts, and essentially it was an opportunity to bring in more stories into the collection. One thing that is very difficult is, my position at History Colorado has only existed for 5 years. So we're talking about decades of history that have not been really preserved at History Colorado. So trying to catch up, National Endowment of the Arts, it was an excellent opportunity to do that work of catching up. So I was actually able to offer artists some type of reimbursement for their work, and this exhibit highlights that work, where I was going to their studios to see their work. They were telling me stories, doing oral histories, and you can see that essentially we have quite a large collection at History Colorado, and when we have an opportunity to exhibit it, it is precisely for this reason, to really highlight the communities, the people, and the artists who are telling these stories and actually are our storytellers.
Wow, that's wonderful. Kind of speak to the importance of highlighting the Hispanic, Chicano, and Latino history in Colorado, because I know that it's very deep-rooted to the history overall of the state, but kind of speak to that. Like, why is it so important that we do have these sorts of exhibits?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned before, there's always been a Latino-Mexican presence here. And when I mean always, is our history in terms of the United States history. The Spanish arrived in northern New Mexico in 1598. And in fact, there are still many families, including mine, that arrived at that time. And so this is really important history that has not been included in our textbooks. And so part of my work is to include these stories. And it's really significant because it also explains the diversity that already existed here so long ago. And when we tell these stories, it's very nice to have visuals, which is very difficult sometimes, especially as we're going further back, because we have generations that we have lost these stories. So it's critical when there are opportunities like receiving grants to be able to find these stories, and they're still there. And these stories help to really explain the dynamics and the inclusivity from the very beginnings. Like, for example, the Constitution of Colorado is actually in Spanish and in German.
Yeah.
So it really, really depicts who is here, and it celebrates the people that were here.
Celebrating that is
right.
very important. Is there anything else that you think people should know about History Colorado? How can folks find these exhibits or more information?
Yeah, definitely visit our website. And if you're interested in knowing what kind of collections we have, for example, representing Latinos, you can actually, on our website, you can kind of peruse through our collection and do some research. We have wonderful archives. We have a wonderful center where you can sit and do as much research. You can see the treaties that were in southern Colorado, and it's a fantastic experience. So you're welcome, anybody is welcome to go, because of course our collections in History Colorado, they belong to the people of Colorado,
Of course.
which is very different than a private collection. So this is available to anybody who is
Wow.
interested in learning more.
Wonderful, very valuable stuff. Thank you so much for joining us. And I encourage everyone to kind of carry on this cultural curiosity beyond Hispanic Heritage Month.
Antonia, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Would love the Culture Report. You guys do a lot of good work.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And we're still looking for your input on members of the community that deserve to be highlighted through 9 shout-outs. You can text the number at the bottom of your screen right now and just let us know.
Yes, we want to hear about all the cool people and organizations doing good work in your communities. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you next week.